Welcome to British Malaya, the land of endless opportunities. Kuala Lumpur, state of Malaya's central of administration, is a thriving city with mosque-like Mughal architecture and the colonial, Victorian and neoclassical styles. Right here, it is where the River Klang runs along the city, and it is also where the settlement began in the area. In the early 1820s, the Malay community settled along the Klang riverbanks and grew into a village on the east side of the river. On the western side of the river, development of the British administrative system was underway under the governing of Sir Frank Sweden in the 1880s. As such, the river forms a natural symbiotic barrier between the Asian mining town on the east and the administrative center on the west. It is further along the stream that the confluence of both the Gombak River and the Klang River forms and gives Kuala Lumpur its name as the Muddy Estuary. Initiated by British resident William Maxwell, a series of colonial buildings were built along the confluence of the river to serve the federal Malay states since 1889. They were built in the Mughal or Northern Indian Islamic style that had its eclectic flares and tropical climate considerations. The onion-shaped domes, external flowery open arch colonnades, and small trees or decorative pinnacles are all typical of the Mughal style. It is such that at a time like this, we will look forward to what will come.
The River of Life is one of the government efforts under his wing to transform the Klang and Gombak rivers into vibrant and bustling waterfronts, which simultaneously will transform Kuala Lumpur's landscape into one that is high livability, offering a quality of life to the city dwellers.
The River of Life project will proceed until 2020 and 4 billion ringgit have been allocated for it.
Context. It plays a major role in placemaking, especially for historic towns that respond directly to their geographical context. The confluence of both the Klang and Gombak River forms the defining context of Masjid Jamek Riverfront as it weaves into its visual forms and experience. Unfortunately, that context of the river fell into a derelict state of misuse along with the Riverfront townscape, losing its sense of place as the river became just a masu'on. Cue the River of Life project in 2012. A government initiative launched to clean, beautify, and spur economic investments along the riverbank. The old buildings were part of adaptive reuse projects to rejuvenate them into public spaces for the community. Richness. In a sea of blank glass facades, the richness and detail of the historical landmarks begin forming from a far range. The details are represented on a large scale, such as the trees, minarets, and clock tower of the Sultan Abdul Samad building. It intrigues you to take a closer look. As you approach it at a closer range, the large-scale surfaces are subdivided into smaller portions with elements of visual intrigue. Your eyes will first focus on its massing, then a smaller bay, then the windows, to the pediment crowning the window, and lastly the carvings on the pediment itself. The classical urban language reveals visual complexity within its order, as a hierarchy is established as you move within a closer viewing range. There is also variety within the architectural elements. An interplay of skill among the windows and arches on the building's facade is used proportionately to the building's height. The windows on the higher level are more compressed than the arches on the ground floor, distorting the scale of the building from a street level. Aside from that, multiple variants of cinquefoil arches and windows are found within one building along the same row to break up the grouping of repetitive use of elements. As you begin to move through the space, a transition begins to occur between the front and the back of the building. Public squares which function as a transition point and linkage are paved as a fully pedestrianized area. This encourages walking, and through walking, you experience the rich ornamentations of the facades. It makes you linger in the area as your eyes focus on varying elements along the facade. The historical buildings are responsive to their surrounding context, as they blend together through repeated elements in horizontal and vertical rhythm, as well as a constant proportion and skyline. The seamless transition complements all the buildings in this area with a language of uniformity. However, they are still distinguishable by the subtle variations in ornamentation, detail, and material. A wide variety of people of different backgrounds also frequent the area, interpreting the place by sight. The colonial architecture of neoclassical orders is used as a representation of democracy and fairness. This is due to its symmetry, scale, and proportion that follows a strict code of building. As such, this aesthetic is used in a variety of functions, such as the library, museum, and courthouse due to the image of its function it has in the minds of its people. The legibility of place is reinforced through the use of the visually appropriate Mughal architecture. The onion domes crowning the top of Masjid, Jamek, and the sink-fall arches are synonymous to the Islamic faith. On a macro scale, the Islamic motif is also used in many of our nation's architecture, making it as part of our national identity. As such, it was found to be appropriate by the British architect C.E. Spooner for the purposes of an administrative centre for the newly independent Malaya. Even in this modern context, this style is suitable as a placemaking element for the identity of Malaysia. From the history to the urban language, the confluence of the river brings about an affluence that continues to inspire as a model of placemaking within this region. The Masjid Jamek district is both rich and visually appropriate in its urban language. Its historical significance draws in people to the city, but it's the details of architecture that makes them linger and appreciate the place. There's always new things to discover within the city, and through the use of architectural cues such as the Masjid Jamek district, an interesting urban language can be used to engage with the people within the city.